this video, we will be discussing how different groups of stakeholders may have conflicting interests to each other, and more importantly, why. A stakeholder, as we have discussed in a previous video, is any person with an interest in the business. There are many different groups, and they can be both internal or external. These groups may want different outcomes for a certain business, and this can cause conflict amongst them. It's really important here to understand that we are talking about groups of stakeholders having conflict between different groups, and not necessarily conflict with the business directly. I'm sure that you have conflicts on a regular basis. This could be conflicts with your friends, your teacher, or even your parents. A conflict is defined as a strong disagreement between people or groups. Often with stakeholders, they may want very different things, have different priorities, and this can cause the conflict. Before we go any further, let's introduce this video's main example. This is Kiara Berman, and she is the Chief Procurement Officer for Miflin Stationery Ltd. Miflin provides stationery such as envelopes, paper, pens, folders, and much more to schools and businesses across the UK. They also sell wholesale to certain supermarkets, meaning that they sell in bulk for cheaper prices to allow the likes of Asda and Tesco's to also make their own profit when selling Miflin stationery. To all the teachers out there, show all of these videos without any ads and gain access to our growing library of over 500 teaching worksheets. Why not visit BizzWizard.co.uk to find out more? As a procurement officer, it is Kiara's job to ensure the business has the best suppliers possible, providing good quality at a reasonable price. This is what procurement means: to obtain something, to buy the necessary equipment or materials. And this is a concept that we will discuss in future videos, and this comes up in many different areas of business. If you pop to the shop and you buy a can of Coke, you have procured this can of Coke. Miflin Stationery Ltd is a large company, employing hundreds of people, and they now have over a dozen different shareholders who have invested money to own a piece of the business. They also have hundreds of customers who rely on them to provide the stationery that they need to keep their own businesses or organisations running. The local community in their town rely on them to provide many jobs, and the government is keen to see Miflin grow and employ more people, who in turn pay more taxes. Keeping all of these groups of people happy at the same time can be very difficult, and occasionally Miflin must make a decision which positively impacts one group whilst negatively impacting another. We are going to look at many different examples of the types of decisions that they could make and how these decisions will impact each group specifically, in many cases causing conflict between the different stakeholders. The team at Miflin Stationery are considering increasing prices of their entire range by 10% across the board. So who is this decision going to impact? Is it good for everybody involved? Well, both shareholders and employees will likely support the company's decision to make this change, as they are likely to be positively impacted by the decision. The company may make more profit, meaning the chance of higher dividends to the shareholders or increased wages to the staff. But this decision negatively impacts one of our groups of stakeholders. Customers would be expected to pay 10% more for their stationery, which will impact their own available income, or if they're a business, it may impact their profits, or mean that they're going to have to manage with less. Because of this, they would not want the company to increase its prices. Here, there is a conflict between multiple groups of stakeholders. One group wants one thing, and the other wants the opposite. Another example would be if Miflin Stationery were considering changing their main supplier to a company outside of the UK, who are able to provide the same goods, but much cheaper. Many groups would be happy with this decision. The savings could positively impact the owners, shareholders, customers, and even employees. But again, there are groups here that would not be happy at all. Groups that are at conflict with the stakeholders in favour of the decision. Think about it. The current main supplier would certainly not want to lose Miflin's business, as they are one of their biggest customers. Losing Miflin may mean that the main supplier will need to reduce costs, perhaps by reducing their own workforce, meaning that people will be out of work. And in some extreme cases, losing a large company like Miflin may even put a supplier completely out of business. The government is another example of a stakeholder group who is unlikely to want this change to happen. If Miflin moves to suppliers outside of the UK, the government will not receive taxes on these purchases. If staff lose their job at Miflin's suppliers, these newly unemployed people may need to claim benefits while they find new work, which will again impact the government. Here, once more, we have different groups of stakeholders wanting different outcomes, and therefore having a conflict in interest between them. Bring this video and over 100 more to life with fun, interactive games, quizzes, and case studies. Why not try the first 25 completely free by visiting BizzWizard.co.uk. Miflin Stationery has a fantastic workforce. Their employees work hard to play their part in the business's success. Because of this, they are thinking about paying all staff a large Christmas bonus as a reward for their continuing efforts. Let's consider which groups of stakeholders may want the company to make this decision and which groups probably don't. So it kind of goes without saying that employees would want them to make this decision. With Christmas being an extremely expensive time of year, this bonus will allow them to treat themselves or their families, or even just put some tasty Christmas food on the table. Another group that may want them to make this change is the local community. If employees of Miflin receive this bonus, they are likely to spend at least some of it in other local businesses, meaning these owners also make more profit. On the other side, shareholders may not want the company to make these bonus payments, as this may mean that their dividends are less. Their annual cut of the profits will be reduced. These bonus payments will impact the company's overall profit, and therefore there is less to divide up between the shareholders. Each of the video courses over at BizzWizard.co.uk also includes an interactive business case study that applies the knowledge learned to a real-world scenario. There are over 1,000 multiple-choice questions, each with detailed feedback, which tests students' understanding of the content. Why not visit BizzWizard.co.uk to find out more? We have discussed a number of different examples of how groups of different stakeholders may have a conflict and actually want opposing outcomes. Let's finally look at an example of people within the same stakeholder group also having a conflict between themselves. If Miflin Stationery decided to build a larger office complex to accommodate a further 100 employees, then people within the local community could want different outcomes. Some people in the community may be very happy at the idea of another 100 jobs being available, as this will decrease local unemployment, meaning more money in the local economy. But perhaps there will be a number of people within the local community who do not want to see this change. This may be because the construction of the new building is directly across the road from their house, and the increased levels of noise pollution are negatively impacting their day-to-day lives. Or maybe there are some people in the local community who disagree with the pollution caused by such a large construction project, and therefore they do not want to see it being built. Here, stakeholders within the same group have a conflict of interest and they want different outcomes. Before we wrap up this video, let's take a look at a few exam tips which you should remember. Stakeholder conflict comes up often in exams, and the number one mistake made by students is that they do not realise the conflict is maybe between different stakeholder groups, not between a stakeholder group and the business itself. Try to ensure that you do not make the same mistake. When answering an extended exam question, you can use stakeholder conflict to show some impressive evaluation skills. If you are able to identify different stakeholder groups and how they may have a conflict over the issue raised in the case study, your examiner is likely to be very impressed. So there you have it. Stakeholders are an extremely important part of any business, and unfortunately, it will be difficult to make decisions that all groups agree with all of the time. For Chiara and the team at Miflin, many decisions they are forced to make will please one group of stakeholders whilst upsetting another. Their success will depend on the company's ability to weigh up the impact of future decisions on these different groups of stakeholders. I want to finish this video with a famous quote from a successful poet. "You can please some of the people all of the time. You can please all of the people some of the time. But you can't please all of the people all of the time." This has been the BizzWizard. See you in the next